All right. After our discussion of the worksheet number 7, it should be very clear to us that the countries can benefit from trade. Okay? No matter mathematically or graphically, we already shown that um, these countries, they could consume more, they could improve their standard of living because of the global trade, regardless of their productivity and the income level, right? Here, it's a good moment for us to recall what we discussed back in chapter 2, more specifically, the relationship among geographic location, global trade, and economic growth. Okay, back in chapter 2, if you still remember, we talked about a pair of countries, right? Great Britain and Japan. We said that both are island economies, so isolated by water, and both are very close to the major market or major continent. That put them in a very good position to be involved in global trade. Okay, actually, if you look this world income map, you would find that um, almost all high income economies are heavily involved in global trade. Canada, United States, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, okay, and some northern European economies as well. Okay, and many poor economies, like People's Republic of Congo, okay, like Haiti, like North Korea, they are isolated from the global market or global trade. Okay. Oftentimes people would say that these rich countries are heavily involved in global trade because they are pretty efficient or productive, so they produce a lot, they want the global market, they tend to export more, right? In other words, they would interpret their heavy interdependence or heavy reliance upon global trade as the consequence of their economic growth. So they become richer or more productive in the first place, and then they export more, right? They are more involved in global trade. But our previous discussion um, probably gave us a different way to interpret this causation. Okay, what we're saying is a country got involved in the global trade, which helps them specialized at what they're really good at. Okay, just like what we saw, in the worksheet. Okay, and so they become more productive. They can enjoy a higher income, a higher standard of living. So the causation could go the other way around. Okay, and so the global trade is not really the consequence, but the cause of a higher economic growth or a higher income. All right. Okay, and towards the end of this chapter, we would like to briefly talk about two misconceptions about comparative advantage. If you remember, we mentioned what Paul Samuelson said, the comparative advantage is so undeniable, but it's not really that straightforward, even for the intelligent people, right? So there are many misconceptions about gains from trade or comparative advantage, but here let's focus on two of them. Okay, the first myth is free trade is beneficial only if your country is strong enough to stand up to foreign competition. Okay, in other words, some people believe that if a country wants to benefit from trade, it got to be strong enough, got to be productive enough, got to be efficient enough. Otherwise, when it opens its door, it's just gonna, a lot of foreign competitions or foreign firms will make the money from this country. So it will be exploited. Okay, and but our discussion already demonstrated that the gains from trade depend upon comparative rather than absolute advantage. Okay, we already said that comparative advantage of an industry depends upon its productivity relative to that of other industries in the country. In other words, this is opportunity cost. Okay, so what we're saying is here, we are not just comparing between the two countries. We are also comparing between the industries in the same country. Okay, and more specifically in our example, country A, so we're referring to the previous slides where you see two tables. Okay, I believe that was slide number 4. So country A has no absolute advantage in both iPad and pencil production due to its low productivity. Okay, however, its productivity disadvantage is even greater in iPads than it is in pencils. Okay, so it pays no enough wage to have the cost advantage in pencils. Okay, all right. Putting together here, what we're saying is a country like A may have no absolute advantage, but every country has a comparative advantage. Okay, because again, as we said, it's comparing one industry with another in the same country, right? We must find that it's more productive or efficient in one industry than it is in the other. Okay, so every country has a comparative advantage. Okay, but some countries, especially the poor ones, may not have any absolute advantage. Again, we said for global trade, what matters is a comparative advantage. Okay, so if you have a country has a comparative advantage, then it should benefit from global trade. Okay, now the third point that we're making here says that if you don't have the absolute advantage, okay, how are you going to compete with other countries on global market? Now, this is a technical way to do that. Okay, so they would pay low enough wage. Okay, so you are less productive. That is true, compared to other countries, but you also pay the workers lower wage. Okay, so we're saying that you can gain a cost advantage, and that kind of even out your disadvantage in productivity. Okay, and which eventually gives you the comparative advantage. All right, now this would lead to another myth here, which is are wages in country A too low? Okay, so in the next video, let's talk about the second myth.